The supply chain nightmare continues. Mass business shutdowns, port closures, shipping disruptions, and a 3-digit spike in freight rates are likely to exacerbate shortages all over the world. But industry insiders are warning that U.S. consumers will be the hardest hit. Port congestion is back with a vengeance at China's ports as new restrictions halt operations and interrupt manufacturing, worsening shipping delays and pushing already elevated prices to new record highs. At the same time, Russia's aggression in Ukraine is heavily weighing on supply chains and agricultural production globally. All around the planet, food supplies are collapsing, while food inflation is on the rise. But before entering today's discussion, don't forget to leave a thumbs up and please subscribe to our channel so you don't miss future videos. Shipping companies, logistic firms, and analysts are reporting that there are huge queues of container ships outside key Chinese ports right now as a new virus outbreak in manufacturing export hubs have unleashed a fresh wave of global supply chain shocks. The ship traffic jam and the container backlog continue to grow by the day, they added. The recent spread of the highly infectious variant prompted authorities to reimpose movement restrictions all across China, including in key manufacturing centers for global trade, paralyzing operations at factories that produce a series of export goods such as consumer electronics and car parts. After thousands of new infections were confirmed, Chinese authorities ordered the closure of the ports of Changchun in Jilin and Yuchen in Shandong, and more recently, Shenzhen and Dongguan have also implemented citywide lockdowns. Over the past week, public transportation and traffic have been interrupted, and mass business shutdowns occurred as the government completely suspended all production and operation activities in an attempt to prevent the outbreak from spreading further. Local news reported that this round of new cases is raging, and the number of infected people have reached the highest level since 2020. This has sparked severe challenges for business operations, especially for those who rely on shipments coming through or leaving the Shenzhen port, one of the country's most important hubs for import and export goods. In terms of logistics business, several members of the shipping logistics branch of the China Transportation Association have reported that the new measures of outbreak prevention and control have led 80% to 90% of warehouses in Shenzhen to close, which is causing massive delays for cargo ships arriving at the port. With the increase of queued ships, the port will face mounting pressure as the traffic jam worsens by the day. For shipping and logistics companies, this also means another increase in operating costs. In an interview with a local paper, a man identified as Mr. Li, who works in a fruit processing factory in Dongguan, said, "Whether it is for work or travel, everything is restricted due to the health crisis. Now, traffic, buses and subways have stopped, and it is difficult to go to work, but then the factory also stopped. This will definitely have an impact on the business sector, such as being unable to deliver orders on time or the canceling of the orders." In addition, Dongguan is one of the areas with the most severe virus outbreaks. Even the logistics companies that are still receiving the goods will refuse to accept the goods when they hear that the source of the goods is Dongguan. As congestion continues to build up, some container ships are being rerouted to avoid extended delays, local chain managers said. Charter rates are expected to ramp up while delays to shipping freight grow longer, they cautioned. Operations at Shenzhen's Yantian port, the world's fourth largest container terminal, are decreasing massively as port workers, truckers, and factory workers are required to stay at home, explained Jasmine Wall, Asia Pacific manager at Seiko Logistics. This implies that it will become difficult to get cargo to and from the ports, and hence whether the terminals are open or not becomes a moot point, added Lars Jensen, CEO at Vespucci Maritime, a container shipping advisor. It will have a major disruptive impact on the supply chain and in turn prolong the current supply chain crisis, Jensen emphasized. There are currently 34 vessels outside the port of Shenzhen waiting to dock, compared to an average of 7 a year ago, according to Refinitiv ship tracking data. At Qingdao, an eastern Chinese port city, there are around 30 vessels waiting to dock, compared to an average of 5 last year. Before lockdowns were put in place again, charter rates for 40-foot containers were already nearing all-time highs across major global shipping routes. In January alone, shipping prices went up by $16,000 on the China to U.S. West Coast route, but UNCTAD data shows that the latest freight rate spike was much higher than that. Shipping prices have jumped from about $10,000 on February 18th to more than $170,000 on February 20th. The underlying freight costs have increased by about 400%, the firm reported. Last year, similar lockdowns reduced 1/3 of capacity at the Yantian port, which triggered a much bigger disruption to global shipping than the one caused by the blockage of the Suez Canal for 6 days after the Ever Given container vessel ran aground, as noted by the director of Maersk, the world's largest container liner. It should be kept in mind that when Yantian was shut down due to the health crisis last year, the disruptive impact on cargo flows was roughly twice the size of the blockage of the Suez Canal, he said. Now, as a new set of restrictions threaten to close the Yantian port once more time, an industry insider is warning that the consequences of the closure are likely to impact U.S. ports just as well. The whiplash effect when it reopens will lay waste to all the progress made in the U.S., said Bjorn Vang Jensen, vice president at consultancy Sea Intelligence. In fact, even if ocean freight terminals remain open, the lack of truck drivers and warehouse operators means there will be delays in loading and unloading shipping containers and delivering goods to end consumers, he argued. With other nearby export hubs also experiencing snarls, including Hong Kong and Shanghai, vessels may have to wait until congestion eases to load cargo, and that will mean that things like phones, televisions, and toys will take longer to get to the United States, according to Peter Sand, chief analyst at Zenetta, a freight analytics firm. I expect the consumers in the U.S. and shippers with cargo going for North America will be hardest hit, Sand warned. The manufacturing and shipping slowdown is already impacting the prices of goods that are about to be exported to the U.S. Amongst the most affected by price escalation are computers and electronic products, which will see price increases as of much as 11.4% starting next month. Shipping companies are also assessing the possibility of a persistent spread of virus cases not only in China, but all over the world, which could result in more widespread disruptions and have significant implications for already rising global inflation. The Chinese authorities' zero-tolerance policy would seem to indicate a high likelihood of further lockdowns, noted Niels Rasmussen, chief shipping analyst at BIMCO, a ship owner association. A slowdown in Chinese exports will exacerbate supply chain delays and reduce inventories held by businesses, which could drive further price increases. On top of all that, Mark Miller, the author of Global Supply Chain Ecosystems and a supply chain expert based in Hong Kong, explained in a recent interview with Brinks why the global supply chain crisis is not getting any better. He said, even though this is a very fluid and fast-moving scenario, notwithstanding the terrible humanitarian calamity, it's already clear that the Russia-Ukraine conflict will have far-reaching ramifications for many supply chains. In particular, there are immediate consequences for ground-based freight networks transporting goods between Asia and Europe by road and by rail. As both countries are major exporters of agricultural products, we can also expect global food supply chains to be impacted, he said. Over the past few weeks, the conflict between Russia and Ukraine has rippled through global crop markets, with major food producers warning that they won't be able to offer grains to the global market this year as they ensure domestic supplies, while others won't have means to harvest crops or even distribute their products at all. Ports in Ukraine are currently closed. While some Russian exporters are trying to fulfill existing contracts, they haven't been able to ship their goods overseas, given that the Black Sea region is now considered a high-risk area. New deals are not being made. Industry insiders said that traders staying away from Russian grain, while exporters can't agree to contracts at the moment because they don't know if they'll be able to fulfill them as the situation evolves. The uncertainty caused by the conflict means that importing nations are scrambling to find alternatives to buy grains from elsewhere, but the options may be limited considering that Russia and Ukraine together account for more than 30% of global wheat trade and nearly a fifth of corn. The new bottlenecks come at a time when global crop prices have already surged to historic levels, fueling inflation and hunger crises, while grain stockpiles have been shrinking all over the planet. If Russia and Ukraine were both to leave the global grain market for a prolonged period, global supply chains would face a dramatic breakdown, with food supplies going down everywhere, while prices reach new all-time highs. Meanwhile, in the United States, food is still in short supply, as consumers all across the nation can see with their own eyes. Analysts are alerting that food shortages might drag on for years. According to a new analysis published by Retail Wire, even before the health crisis and before the global strife had begun, food insecurity was already on the rise in the U.S. due to various factors including lower domestic production, wildfires, natural hazards, climate change, and pests. Adding increased transportation costs, labor shortages, supply chain snarls to that picture, well, it's safe to say that the United States food supply chains have never faced so much pressure, and conditions are set to aggravate this year, given that our domestic supply of fertilizer is down by as much as 50%. And we're in the middle of a conflict with the world's biggest fertilizer exporter. Due to higher fuel costs, due to lockdowns, due to zero capacity in maritime logistics, and the impact of the Russia and Ukraine crisis, U.S. consumers should expect to pay higher prices for food and all sorts of consumer goods. Each passing day brings new challenges to millions of Americans that are still struggling to recover from the disruptions caused by the health crisis. Food insecurity is going to shake our country to the core in the coming months, and we will be extremely lucky if things do not start to fall apart in our economy and financial markets before that happens. Trouble is ahead. It's time to start planning a way out of this mess while you still can. Thank you very much for watching. Please subscribe to our channel.